Hello all, and welcome to the workbench. Well, not the workbench. The workbench is actually over there, but welcome to the review desk. Let's just call it that. This is the first time streaming on YouTube Direct. I decided to do it this time because no one seems to be on Twitch, which is totally fine. But what I wanted to cover today was, as you can see here, I've got the GLD and I've got the DRZv2. And the question I'm getting a lot is which one you should buy. And I'm going to spoil it right up front. And if you're new to the if you're rather new to scratch building yourself, definitely the GLD. If you don't mind a lot of time and tweaking, the DRZv2 may be for you, but I wouldn't rule out the GLD. So let's dive right into it. I mean, normally there'd be an intro here, some music or something, but we don't quite have an intro yet. But a couple of people have suggested one, so let the talking hands start the review. So let's dive in the GLD first. You've probably seen me do the build video of it. The nice thing about the webcam setup I've got today is I can get really up and close. And if I tweak the focus a bit, yeah, right all the way in, which is pretty awesome. So one of the things you may actually notice is I've got the DRZ wheels on here. I did take I've spent all afternoon comparing the DRZv2 to the GLD here, and it's been hard to draw a conclusion as to which one's better. And one of the reasons for that is that my drifting ability today has gotten significantly better, and every time I swap over to cars, it gets better and better and better. So I don't have a stable base to really compare against. The one thing I have noticed between the two of these, however, is that the DRZv2 really likes flat tyres, and the GLD doesn't actually do that bad with rounded tyres. I think I'd actually probably go for the LF5s. Can you see it there? Probably not. Oh, that's because I got it reversed. These are LF5s. I'd put LF5s on the front as well. And on a high grip track, this has been absolutely brilliant. You can see I've got the full size receiver on here. I'm actually just waiting on the mini receivers, but it's been very, very difficult to do a good cabling job on this. I actually have the cables routed under here, and then they pop out underneath here. So that cable's hidden, but once you get to this side, I can put the receiver there, but then I've got a whole lot of extra cable that I've got to work out what I do. So I might actually reroute this cable back under here to the receiver when I put it there and get rid of this. Interesting, those who are really, really observant, and I just realised that's my Windows VM. Those who are really observant may have noticed I'm actually not running a gyro on the GLD. I'm actually finding the gyro gets in the way of drifting for me, at least on high grip tracks. I've tried with the lower grip tracks, but unfortunately the marine carpet I've got is not the best for that. Oh, I just realised you can see my fingerprints on here, so anyone wants to take a screenshot and capture my fingerprints, there you go. You can now impersonate me. Yeah, so I don't have a good surface for low grip drifting, which is a real shame. I might try this out in the kitchen later, but my kitchen tiles are a bit uneven and I tend to notice those little bumps. So back to comparing the two. What is there to say? So one of the things I really like about the DRZv2, as you can see here, is the adjustable springs. That's been a really, really nice feature, whereas the GLD uses these spacer clips, and I find them very, very difficult to get right. I actually did try swapping the springs between the two and trying a set of Eagle Racing springs, and these springs seem to be a bit of a unique length, which is very, very irritating, because I wanted to soften the front up a bit. Luckily, I do have the springs with it, and if you are buying the GLD, you probably do want to buy the springs. And one of the other things to note, if anyone's been really observing my build videos, they'll actually note that I put these front swing arms on backwards. So I actually had them all the way back. So I had about, rather than a couple of degrees of camber, I had about 20 degrees of camber. So the wheels, when you turn them, would make one wheel basically come up off the ground. It was rather bad. And I only just realised it by pure chance and swapped it over. So building the GLD is definitely not without its difficulties. I did like the instructions on it. The setup guides are totally useless because I've since gone and adjusted all the arms, and they're completely different to what was suggested in the GLD manual. And while I'm on the topic of the GLD manual, I actually went to go look for it this morning, and I can't find the link to the PDF. Well, the link I've got to the PDF no longer works anymore, and it's actually not on the GL Racing website anymore. So I might have to pull up the box and see if there's a good link for it. But I suspect they've taken it down. It looks like they've moved on their Google Drive, and it's no longer available, which is a bit of a negative for the GL racing stuff. But I've always had issues finding their manuals. Not everything is actually on their website, which is a bit counterintuitive. So what do I like about each? So the DRZv2 is now, after a lot of tweaking, and I mean a lot of tweaking, very, very balanced. As I said, my skill was improving, and I could get the GLD to countersteer drift and keep that drift for a while. The GLD, however, is significantly more nimble. This can turn on the spot in a way that this could only dream of. So this is definitely the more nimble car, but keeping it in the corners is a lot more difficult. And I've yet to determine if that's just balance or skill. I suspect it's actually tuning and balance, because I actually built the GLD very, very poorly. I was getting a bit annoyed at how long the DRZv2 took to build, so I actually cut some corners on the GLD. The end result, however, has been kind of surprising. The GLD, I just popped off the rear swing arm. The GLD, even with a poor build, comes out in a driftable state. The DRZv2, in a poor build, has a lot of trouble drifting. So this, as someone new to the hobby, is definitely the better vehicle. You can make mistakes and still succeed. Whereas I suspect if you're willing to put the time and effort into it, you'll definitely get a much cleaner looking build, that's for sure. I mean, this is not the prettiest build. Even though I do need to fix it up, I still suspect that this is going to be the better looking chassis. But it required a lot of tweaking. And there's not a lot of information out there. And some of the tweaking that I've done, and some of the tweaking that BMR has done, has been at odds with each other. And that might just be due to high grip surfaces, or just due to how this one's set up, or my balance or something. But it required a lot of trial and error. If I had to pick either one of these, it would definitely be the GLD. I'm having a lot more fun with the GLD. It's really getting in the corners. I'm finding it a tiny bit easier to control. As I said, I'm not running with a gyro. And with the gyro, they feel about the same. Still not totally sold on the idea of a gyro, to be honest. Once again, maybe it's just a low grip surface thing. One of the interesting things about the GLD is the battery bay, and this wheel's going to fall over because I accidentally knocked the arm off earlier. The GLD battery bay is significantly wider. So I use one of these Nanotech 300 mils. Once again, the screen's back to front, and there's a lot of room for it to move back and forward. And I've actually shoved cables under here as well to basically because it was convenient, but also to hold the battery in place. Whereas on the DRZv2 in the 90mm wheelbase, that's actually a fairly tight fit. There's not a lot of room to move. And more importantly, this battery is right up against the motor, and that motor gets hot, and it does cause this battery to puff up. So not happy about that. I've noted some of my personal pet peeves with the DRZ in other videos, and I'll just give a brief summary. One, the batteries puff up due to being right next to the motor. The manual has one or two instructions that are not clear and a bit misleading. It requires a lot of work because every single one of these ball joints is tight out of the box, and there seems to be a lot of tuning work. And this front clip is not the easiest thing to put in place. Getting access to it, there's a little plate on the top here, and putting pressure on that while the front suspension is in place is very, very difficult. You're actually better off getting the white body clip in before you put the front suspension, because you can get your finger in there and push down on that little black plate there before you screw in the bottom there. So that's about it. That, and there's been some wiggle and quality issues. So that you can see this top arm here, it's literally wiggling around in there. So there's a lot of play in there. But the play is only one side. That's actually shaped like a cone. It's not like one side's actually wider than the other, which is why you might hear me in my other reviews say I don't think Atomic's maintaining their tools well. It seems like half the machine is built really well. One side of the machine is built really well, and the other side's a bit dodgy. So this side, you'll see there's next to no play there. Does this make a difference in practice? Probably not. BMR's commented that it does screw your alignment up a bit because it's a couple of degrees out, basically. So depending on if your turn was a left or right on your previous turn, it can throw certain calibrations off. That said, this is not without its issues. You can see the wheels wiggle a bit, but I think that might be because I haven't got the proper spacers on here. This chassis needs spacers. I've found that the wheels don't sit flush and solid unless you've got those spacers in place. And there is a bit of wiggle, but that wiggle comes in different places. It's mainly with the wheel going back and forward rather than twisting in place. And I'm kind of happy to live with that. The interesting thing about this is the servo setup. So the steering setup. The servo on this is actually phenomenal. I was going full lock to full lock, and I think it's actually faster than the servo I'm using in here, which is my purple special, which is basically the Atomic servo. This was lightning fast, and it's not clear to me if it's just that it doesn't have to move much to go from full lock to full lock, so it's a travel thing, or if the servo is actually faster. But the setup in terms of steering is great on this. You'll notice that there's like a half moon steering thing. This setup is really, really good, and the best thing about it is it keeps the entire front setup like rock solid. So just tweaking it. So the wheel's actually moving, but like the actual suspension setup itself is not. One interesting thing to note about this, however, is it's because of the rear wheel, right? You probably actually, let's go dead on with the camera because it'll make it easier to see. So you can see the outer wheel here is turning in very, very slightly. Before, when I had a lot of camber, that was even more pronounced. But the problem with the steering setup here is it does, as you do apply weight, everything does shift a bit. I don't know what that means in terms of tuning. This is something I'm still learning, but as I said, like you get this vehicle out and it just drifts. Probably the thing that burnt me with the DRZv2 is that I built it and went to go drift, and I struggled a lot, and then I tuned it and it got a bit easier, but I was still struggling. I got this out on the track, and the first time I turned that steering wheel, this was drifting. Once again, I don't know if this was my skill level improving, or if this just had to do with this chassis is really, really easy to drift. But for whatever reason, I just find this vehicle a lot more precise and easy to control. One of the other issues with this vehicle is that you can't adjust the camber very easily on the rear wheels. And I've had to tighten the adjustable swing arms all the way in just to get it to sit flat. Even if you set it to default settings, the wheels are actually tilted outwards slightly, which is a tiny bit odd. I'm not sure what's going on here. And I've been having some issues with the one side of the ball head here, but I suspect that's because I've just done something to screw up this ball head, and that's where the problem is. The ball heads themselves are fine. It's just I'd get the occasional ball head that needed a bit of tweaking, but apart from that, you'd clip them on and there'd be no resistance. So from a build standpoint, there's very minimal tweaking required to get this one working. This was just honestly a pleasure to work on. Everything's really, really well thought out. I kind of wish the servo was offset, or I had enough room, like on this one, where I could mount the servo and the ESC up the front. And I just realised I can't put the motor up the front anymore because I'm going to be hitting the ESC. That's a bummer because I did want to try the motor in a different position. So that's one of the other things, that the motor here can actually be mounted down the bottom, like I've got it here, like it's flat with the chassis, or it could be mounted where my thumb is up here. And that apparently does things for weight distribution. I'm assuming it throws the vehicle more into the turns. I know there's other people out there that have videos where they do have it up. I don't know what the difference is, but I'd hope to play with it at a later date. If I have to rewire that ESC, I'll do it. That's not much of an issue. But yeah, I only just realised I don't think I've given myself clearance to put the motor up above here. I'll have to go look at some videos. But that's one of the other nice things about it. Yeah, not much really to say beyond that. Like, apart from, as I said, I'd like to be able to mount the servo or whatever in there. Or the receiver or something, because these full-size receivers kind of suck up here, and I'm just going to have to wait for the mini receivers to mount it there. So I think I will still continue to try both vehicles, but yeah, if you haven't ever built a Mini Z chassis yourself, this is the one to go for. Easier to work, the instructions are easier, you can make mistakes and it still comes out better, and it's very, very nimble, almost too nimble, to the point where you may want to back off your steering settings on your transmitter a tiny bit. But this one definitely seems like the more competitive choice as well. But we'll know more in a couple of weeks' time, when I've had enough time on both and I can take them both out onto my track and give them a thrashing and see which one I like better. So this morning I said this was better by a large margin. This afternoon I'd say this is only ahead by a small to medium margin, and time will tell. That's about it. I guess the last thing I want to quickly cover is, if you are buying this, you want to buy the spring set for the front, the spring set for the rear, and you might want to take the opportunity to get the adjustable caster set. One of the things I've noticed with this plastic is once you screw it in the first time, if you back it out and retry it, it doesn't grip as well nearly the second time. So you want to build it to spec the first time rather than upgrade it at a later date. That's about it. I'm going to keep this video short and simple. We're now at, 17 minutes. So this will be the shortest video I've done in a long time. Apologies to everyone who's had to suffer through my 2-hour-long videos. And if you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments or ping me via alternate means, and I will try and get those answered. I will be doing smaller videos going forward and getting some drift footage of the two, both with the front-rounded wheels and the flat D LF5s on the track, just so you can compare the two and see which style you prefer. Thanks for joining me, and see you later. Keep on building.